Ancient Rome was a multi-ethnic society with a large population that required a broad spectrum of jobs to sustain its economy. Prestigious professions, military leadership, and political administration were reserved for the Roman upper class, whereas ordinary people were involved in various jobs. Moreover, the Roman Empire depended on slaves, and any wealthy person could keep as many as 500 slaves. The typical jobs were farming, construction, and domestic services, while educated slaves could work in medicine, teaching, and accounting. Some jobs, however, like the orgy planner, urine taxer, or the dwarf seller, were bizarre even to the slaves. So without further ado, let's begin. Number 1, the dwarf sellers. I already established that the people of Rome were quite fond of their slaves, so it should come as no surprise that slave trader was a relatively normal position back then. However, today I want to look at a special type of slave trader, the so-called dwarf seller. This is definitely a weird job description, but they were a fundamental part of the Roman entertainment industry. The Roman Empire imported dwarfs from around its territory and brought them to the Colosseum. There they would take part in dwarf battles, which usually weren't to the death and functioned as light entertainment. You could see this as comic relief from all the real killing taking place during the gladiator fights. The slaves would take part in special acts such as dwarf boxing or fights between dwarfs and women. So as much as they loved blood and gore, they still needed some laughs to go with all the killing. Number 2, chicken fortune teller. This job actually still exists today, even though it may have changed slightly. Just like modern astrology girls who try to predict your future by your zodiac sign or tarot cards, the ancient Romans had their own version of that activity. The Polarius were chicken interpreters who told the fortune of military campaigns based on how chickens ate. Instead of being tasked with taking care of more regal birds like eagles or owls, the Polarius had to take care of sacred military chickens. I'm not shitting you. One of the strongest empires in history literally had sacred chickens that were relied on to tell whether a battle would go well or not for the Roman army. Before a battle, the Polarius would release the chickens and throw corn on the ground. If the chickens ate, all was well. If they ate so messily they dropped kernels. Even better, if they didn't eat, oh no, if they refused to come out of their cages, you may as well send everyone home. There even is a story about one Roman fleet commander who was so impatient with the poor birds, who were understandably dizzy from sailing, not wanting to come out of their cage, that he threw them overboard. He lost the battle and was scolded for drowning his fleet. Number 3, the Vestal Virgins. The Vestals were the priestesses of the Roman goddess Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, and were considered vital to the security of Rome. The duty of the Vestals was to keep the fire in the temple of Vesta burning. They believed that the failure to do so would lead to chaos in the empire. Vestals who broke any vow, such as letting the temple fire go out, were beaten behind a curtain in the dark. And this was the good ending. So let's talk about the bad ending. As you can already guess, it was essential for the Romans that the Vestals were virgins.
You might touch the finish line, but you've never touched a woman.
You're right. I haven't lost my virginity.
This was obviously a drawback and a risk at the same time. If they were to lose their virginity, they were usually walled alive. This means nothing less than getting locked behind a brick wall until you dehydrate and die. I could imagine more pleasant ways to go out. However, a faithful Vestal virgin was treated fairly well and lived a secure life. I mean, even today, some monks and nuns still vow to abstain from any sexual activity, although luckily the punishments today aren't nearly as harsh. Number 4, the orgy planner. Now we get to the job all of you were waiting for. Orgy planners were responsible for planning the perfect orgies and sex parties, where guests would freely partake in open and unrestrained sexual activities. They had the authority to select the food, drinks, and music, as well as beautiful men and women. The Greco-Roman world shared the party god Bacchus, lord of wine and ritual madness. They celebrated him with the Bacchanalia. Attendance of these parties had a tendency to really tap into that divine, crazy party energy and go around on a debauched, often violent sex spree. At one orgy, the legendary bisexual Alcibiades and his homies stole the dicks of hundreds of statues throughout Athens. By the way, the same Alcibiades guy was a lover of Socrates and famous for cuckolding the Spartan king. However, the orgy planners were despised, especially by the lower class, as they thought the entire event to be unnecessarily luxurious and expensive, or simply because they didn't get an invite themselves. Number 5. The shit collector. The so-called stercorarius, or to say it more bluntly, the shit collector. Ancient Rome was famous for its aqueducts and toilets, innovations that were so advanced it would take centuries to see them return after the fall of Rome. What a lot of people forget is that most of these advanced services were available only for important public buildings. Regular residential areas where most people lived were not on the plumbing grid. That's why the stercorarius had to go from house to house and collect people's shit bucket by bucket and wagon by wagon. He then had to drag everybody's shit outside the city, where he would sell it to farmers. For his troubles, the stercorarius got 11 copper coins, so he wasn't particularly rich. Considering Rome's bumpy stone streets, it wasn't a rare occurrence for one of these shit wagons to literally flood the stercorarius. So if this wasn't your fetish, better stay away from the job. Number 6. The urine taxer. The urine tax collector was basically the big brother of the shit collector. But as stupid as this job sounds, it actually had an important background. Urine was widely used in various chemical processes, such as extracting ammonia to clean and whiten clothes, soaking animal skin before tanning, and even using it as toothpaste. I guess golden shower enjoyers were quite happy in Rome. The urine would be collected from public toilets and cesspools. When the finances of the Roman Empire had been crippled after nearly 2 years of civil war, Vespasian inherited the empire and left his successor with a profit through the urine tax collection. When Titus Vespasian's son blamed his father for applying the tax on urine, he held a piece of gold coin procured from the tax against his nose and replied, "Money does not stink." Number 7. Slave manager. Vicarious were the middle managers between their masters and their fellow slaves. And yeah, we're literally talking about real middle manager slaves who managed other slaves.
That just sounds like slavery with extra steps.
Ooh la la, someone's gonna get laid in college.
These vicars would mostly do office work to manage their master's possessions and businesses. It wasn't so bad of a gig either, since it turns out that some vicars would be given access to part or all of their master's assets. Some of them would be paid a portion of the profits made, allowing them to eventually buy their freedom. Ironically, more enterprising slaves would opt to buy their own slaves and vicar to continue growing their wealth. So just imagine working at Amazon and you have the same experience. But that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. This was Just Casual, and I'm standing outside your window.